Welcome to Whisperer of Madness. If you're enjoying the story, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps grow the channel and this community. Neutralization, was that an illusion? Leyland muttered under his breath and turned his attention to the AI chip's records. Unknown force field interference detected. Host has entered a state of confusion. Interplanar spell formation engaging countermeasures charging. Magus tower prepared to eradicate interference beginning. Host has successfully been restored to normalcy. Alert ended. The red records made Leyland feel gloomy. In the middle of all this, the spiritual force seed that he had sent into the astral plane had vanished without a trace into a spatial rift. Tower Genie, Leyland called out. My lord. The green genie immediately flew towards Leyland. How much of our energy reserves are left? Energy currently at 1.9% of maximum. Energy boost has been initiated, it replied instantly. What led to such a huge consumption? Records are in chaos. The tower genie expressed a rare puzzlement. Indeed, what happened a moment ago was real. It wasn't an illusion. Leyland drew a deep breath. He'd always known interplanar research was risky. Still, what he'd experienced just now was possibly his greatest research crisis to date. Fortunately, the 3 astral laws are unbreakable. Hence, the other creature was unable to pass through and could only create an illusory projection. Leyland stroked his chin, pondering about the events that had happened one more time. It was merely an illusory projection, and yet it was that menacing. Had I opened an astral gate and allowed the other party to enter, perhaps my entire territory would have been destroyed. With such thoughts, he felt his lingering fear wash over him. Fortunately, it lacked the power to do anything. The situation was resolved by the countermeasure of the dimension spell formation. He exhaled a deep breath and turned his head around. Do you know? A huge decapitated goat head with yellow liquid flowing out of it appeared behind him. 2 huge lifeless pupils locked onto Leyland S. In a split second, a layer of black scales surfaced on Leyland's body and both his eyes turned amber. Petrifying gaze. Rays of mysterious light hit the opposing wall, and a layer of whitish-gray stone covered it. The goat head disappeared into thin air. This matter is not finished. Leyland's face turned gloomy. AI chip, start scanning. Beep. Mission established. Beginning scan. It took but a few seconds for it to respond with its findings. Remnants of an unknown force field have been detected. Confirmed to be interplanar contamination. Buzz, he stopped the whole interplanar spell formation with a wave of his hand. And then, with a blast at the center, the astral stone turned into smithereens. The energy from this astral stone that he'd acquired from Vance of the Rawlythe family had been exhausted completely. Seeing the course of events, Leyland took a deep breath before stepping up to the middle of the room. In the library, multiple sprinklers that were fixed to the ceiling and connected to an enormous pool in the center started spraying a fragrant whitish-green liquid. Rank 5 purification pool. I hope it's of help. Interplanar defense was a compulsory course for anyone performing research in the area. Leyland had gotten Gilbert's own purification system a while ago and built an enhanced version for himself. Green liquid dripped from the nozzles, its antiseptic scent strong and sharp. Soon, Leyland was completely drenched. As the green liquid washed over him, green fur started to appear on the surface of his clothing before being washed off by the same liquid again. This is so troublesome. Leyland assessed his situation and furrowed his brows. He stripped himself naked and jumped into the pool in the center. Zai, an enormous whirlpool formed of pearl-white liquid started bubbling lightly. Traces of black liquid oozed out of Leyland's pores, visible to the naked eye. After several rinses, Leyland stepped into another purification room. Inside, many human-sized flowers and plants were blooming. They opened up their petals and revealed their scarlet-red tongues with suction pads. After multiple purifications, Leyland wore a brand new loose-fitting robe and relaxed on a recliner. I've sent many seeds into the astral plane in the past 3 months, but unfortunately I didn't have help from the coin of destiny. There's no way to find the Blackrain world again. Not only did I suffer an irrecoverable loss, I have even provoked such a heinous creature. Leyland weighed his gains and losses. He had run many experiments on the astral plane and had gotten some substantial gains. Yet, compared to his engagement with the multi-armed race, it was all worth nothing. With the AI chip's help, he had figured out the secret spell and named it multi-limb strength. The AI chip simulations had proven that such a secret spell had the ability to break apart one's genetic limitations. So much so that it could enhance Leyland's current vitality by 5 to 10 points. To Leyland, such temptations were irresistible. The more powerful one's vitality, the harder it was to advance further. When his vitality was at 10 to 20 points, he hadn't bothered much about raising it. But now, to advance further from his base was an uphill task. If word leaked of his multi-limb strength, it would drive body-refining magi crazy and cause them to act. Even this one gain was enough to offset all his losses in the past 3 months. This was the main attraction of the astral plane. There were both sides to a coin, no profit without loss. After becoming unable to use the coin of destiny, Leyland's experiments had been at a bottleneck, with multiple attempts to proceed resulting in failure. Especially today. He'd unexpectedly drawn towards himself a completely unknown living creature. It was, in fact, not an organism, just a formless being with consciousness. When it flared up, it was potentially more horrifying than an ancient curse. My luck had been average. I think it's time to stop. Leyland had a bad premonition about the dangers he had been facing. He shut his eyes lightly, and when he opened them, the same decapitated goat head appeared in front of him again. Its eyes were filled with death and traces of ridicule. Leyland sighed. Facing the goat head eye to eye, his face was expressionless. 10 seconds later, the goat head once again disappeared without a trace, as if what had just happened was another illusion. So troublesome. Leyland was evidently annoyed. How dare it? He got up in a flash, grabbed his clothes, and went to the center of a restricted room. Grasping the knob of the door, another illusion appeared as the yellowish bronze knob morphed into a familiar goat head, glaring at Leyland and giving him a sinister smile. Such circumstances would drive any Magus crazy and cause many other repercussions as well. Upon opening the door, a cold, mechanical voice was transmitted. This is the core room. Only host Leyland Farlier is permitted entry. All trespassers will be executed. Soon after, horrifying spell energy locked onto Leyland's body. Rays of red, green, and blue scanned his body. Scanning has begun. Authority verified. Alarm lifted. With the last sound, his body felt a rush of relief. This was a small core room. There was only an experimental table with a crystal ball, and on top of it were intermittent images of a white bone. Leyland laid down on the experimental table. Soon, he could hear noises from all around. First were some animalistic growls, and then there were the pitiful cries of someone in the throes of death. Leyland was unmoved and nonchalantly gave the order, "Begin radiation." Beginning radiation. A mysterious energy appeared from the lamia fingerbone, streaking across Leyland's body. Slowly, the giant Chem-In serpent bloodline in his body was roused to a gentle boil. Given any other time, he would have enjoyed this process immensely. However, this time he felt different. Streaks of ash-gray fog appeared all over his body, enveloping him like a huge callus. It made him feel like he was struggling on his deathbed. Remnants of an unknown force field have been detected in the host, confirmed to be interplanar contamination. The AI chip repeated, and then added something else. It is advised to stop the lamia radiation. No, increase the radioactive level. Raise it by 10 times. An ambitious glare burned in Leyland's eyes. The AI chip only had the rights to suggest, not to execute anything. Acting on his will, rays of blue currents radiated from the lamia bone, causing huge energy undulations. It broke through the gray fog and shone onto his body. Leyland groaned as he clenched his teeth, both hands holding tightly to the experimental table, using so much strength that he left imprints on it. Purplish-black patches started to appear on his body, looking similar to sunburns. Epidermal cells are now 39.78% damaged. Host is suggested to abort the radiation. The AI chip sounded once again. It seems to be insufficient. Increase intensity, adjust to 50 times. Leyland locked his jaw tightly and hissed. Zai. The enormous radiation tangled with the ash-gray fog, turning it into a liquid that dripped down. The noises surrounding Leyland began to intensify in both volume and chaos. The white goat head once again appeared in front of Leyland. This time, the fur on it started to be shed one by one, and the 2 horns started to shrink back into its skull, resulting in a huge change in its appearance. After numerous alterations and transformation, the original goat head had morphed into a female human head. Her eyes were all white and were streaming blood. Ancient blood serpent castle, the force fields have been neutralized. Host body's contamination is being dissipated. With the mist surrounding Leyland's body becoming weaker, the female head in front of him became less distinct and finally disappeared into the air. When the last bit of mist was gone, Leyland immediately ordered for the radiation to be stopped. Following that, he saw his skin looking as if it had been severely burnt and smiled wryly. These injuries would definitely have killed any normal person. However, for Magi, as long as the astral pollution could be gotten rid of, everything else was not an issue. Leyland wriggled his body, and the wounds on his body began to crack. Skin began to crease in a process similar to that of snakes molting. Then, as if taking off his clothes, he shed off the dead skin and revealed fair, unblemished skin once more. In just a few minutes, Leyland, who had seemed like a malicious spirit, had regained his normal appearance. After changing his clothes, Leyland huffed a long sigh. It really was quite dangerous this time. That creature with consciousness is still something I am unable to comprehend. Just some spiritual force contamination was too much for him to handle himself. This was an existence whose strength definitely surpassed the morning star realm, maybe even at the strength of a radiant moon Magus. If not for his lamia fingerbone allowing him to treat this through the neutralization of force fields, he would be plagued with troubles for a long time. Now, though, even if the contamination through radiation was very powerful, the lamia was an ancient rank 5 existence. When the radiation from two highly ranked existences collided, the only result would be mutual destruction. Leyland had taken a risk with this, but the effects seemed pretty good. What happened this time is a warning. It looks like I should pause my experiments for now. Leyland walked out of the core room, ordering the tower genie to send him some desserts and drinks, before he asked, "How has the situation outside been in the time that I've been experimenting?" While experimenting, Magi usually disconnected themselves from all communication to prevent any disturbances. The tower genie now had the role of something like a housekeeper. Not only did it have to intercept messages from the outside, it also needed to filter out the most important information for Leyland to peruse. "Someone from Freya's family came here. There's even an invitation card." Leyland touched his chin. Could it be that she's already broken through to the crystal phase? His relationship with Freya was not half bad, especially after selling the bloodline gemstones to her. Though Freya had then secluded herself and not contacted him, they were part of the same clan. He had to give her some face. Leyland thought for a moment and sent down an order, "Inform Parker that I'll meet that Timmy tomorrow." Besides this, there were a few other miscellaneous matters that Leyland had to take care of as the one with the highest authority. Without his approval, many things could not be implemented on this piece of land. These were all necessary. Even if they might be complicated and result in lowered efficiency, they could not be avoided. The next day, Timmy, who had been waiting for a long time, finally saw the well-known Leyland in the Magus Tower. An adamantine puppet sent in some desserts and drinks before withdrawing. Leyland watched the reserved young man. He was obviously very young, but the purity of his bloodline far exceeded that of Noah from Robin's family. This descendant of Freya's family was probably someone that they favored. Sending him here was a show of how highly they valued Leyland. "Lord Marquis Leyland's Magus Tower is truly wondrous," Timmy praised from the bottom of his heart. Leyland's top-grade Magus Tower had a reputation of its own within the Ouroboros clan. There were always guests coming over and gasping in awe over it. However, when these words were produced from Timmy's lips, there was something very sincere about it that gave Leyland a favorable impression. After chatting for a while, Leyland asked, "Timmy, what are your intentions in coming here?" At the mention of his business, Timmy turned solemn. "I was asked by the head of the family to pass this invitation to my lord." As he said this, he respectfully passed an invitation card to Leyland. Usually, if it was something common, communication via secret imprints was enough. Getting someone to specifically send an invitation was only something that large, noble families would do. Even then, it was only done when there was some celebration or important festival. There was a sweet scent from the surface of the paper. After skimming through the content, Leyland nodded. "Freya has already advanced to the crystal phase. As expected, it's a joyous matter. I'll personally congratulate her." For high-ranked Magi, advancement was always very difficult. Each success definitely called for a celebration. When Leyland had achieved the hydro phase, he had invited his seniors over. Compared to the hydro phase, the crystal phase was multiple levels higher and more difficult. "Many thanks, my lord." Timmy bowed respectfully. Though Freya had only just advanced and could not be considered any genius as compared to Robin, she was still quite decent. In addition, their family still had plans of having a good relationship with Leyland. After all, Leyland was so young and already a hydro-phase Magus. His future was boundless. This was without them even knowing of Leyland's advancement to the crystal phase. If they did, they would definitely value him even more highly. I definitely need to go this time. An invitation from nobility was extremely important. The other party had even especially sent someone over, and if Leyland did not attend, even Freya would feel very uncomfortable. After sending Timmy away, Leyland lightly sighed. With his current strength, the rank 2 Timmy naturally would not be able to sense his real aura if he wanted to conceal it. Crystal phase at 200 years of age, that would be too high profile. Leyland shook his head. I need to keep a low profile and hide my strength before going there. Leyland had gotten used to being a wolf in sheep's clothing. Right from his days as an acolyte, he developed a technique to conceal his aura and spiritual force waves. On top of that, he had obtained that spiritual force compression technique, making things much easier for him. After reaching rank 3, the effects of these spells became weaker. Leyland improved on them again with the spell models he had obtained as well as those from the Ouroboros clan. He had even especially created a few secret supporting techniques. Leyland was very confident in his concealing skills. If he went all out, even peak rank 3 crystal phase Magi might not be able to see through him. Unless it was a morning star Magus in front of him, there was nobody to fear. Freya is the beloved disciple of the Blood Duchess, Emma. She would normally attend. Leyland touched his chin, pondering deeply. Recently, Kesha mentioned that the mentors seem to have found a world that could very well be purgatory. The 3 elders have all been deep in experiments on the astral plane, and it's not quite likely that they'll emerge. The desire Chem-in warlocks had towards purgatory was something outsiders were unable to comprehend. Mere traces of the Snake Dowager was enough for all the warlocks in the Ouroboros clan to go crazy. After all, the restraints of their bloodlines could only be resolved with her. In addition, the purgatory world itself was a giant world. It held boundless riches, and compared to the surrounding worlds, it could be said to be a large-scaled world. If not, the Snake Dowager would not have chosen to move her community here. This resulted in many Magi going forth and exploring. The Snake Dowager is probably in existence at or above rank 7. Even if they found her, what could the mentors offer her? Leyland shook his head, not very supportive of Gilbert's actions this time. However, there was little that could be done. Since the 3 elders were now consumed in their research on the astral plane, this gave him the chance to take advantage of the situation. The other high-ranked warlocks could not see through his pretense, and hence, concealing his spiritual force undulations and going forth to congratulate them was very possible. Fresh flowers filled the ground. This was Freya's family's territory. As it was a noble family that had been passed down through generations, the range of their territory far exceeded that of his own. The wealth of the residents was something that Leyland, who had only managed things for 100 years, could not compare to. Freya's castle was situated beside a snaking river, with a sea of flowers around it. Diverse, splendid flower petals spilled all over the ground. Leyland even smelt a fishy smell amidst the fragrance in the air. He extended an arm and immediately caught a 5-colored spotted snake under a plant. The scales of this snake were giving off a magnificent luster, complementing the flower petals all over the ground. It was basically impossible to distinguish them with the naked eye. As if feeling the bloodline in Leyland, the flower snake did not dare resist. Instead, it tried to curl itself up as much as possible, looking rather pitiful. Looks like another result of crossbreeding. Leyland was speechless and released this flower snake which had toxins potent enough to break through an ordinary Magus, innate defensive spell back into the sea of flowers, shaking his head. As bloodline nobility, it would be unusual not to concentrate on techniques on modifying bloodlines. However, for Leyland, who had gathered precious experimental data from the Quicksand organization, these experiments were rather unsophisticated. All the creatures which had been created were the type that he couldn't even bother catching another glimpse of. In comparison, the castle at the heart of the Sea of Flowers was what interested Leyland the most. The ancient blood serpent castle that Freya's family had inherited was not a mere place for commoners like Leyland's Onyx Castle. This was a true ancient Magus castle. After the great effort of bloodline warlocks across countless generations, every inch of the land of the ancient blood serpent castle was completely soaked in the power of magic. This created a very formidable defense that could defend against even Morning Star Magi for a period of time. Banquet and invitation in the ancient blood serpent castle were many phenomena that even their current leader, Freya, could not explain clearly. As a result, when he first saw the crimson structure, Leyland quickly grew fond of the place. This sort of ancient castle is what is truly fit to be the residence of a Magus. My Onyx castle lacks these details, he thought as he sighed. Freya's family was rumored to even have seen Morning Star Magi amongst their ranks in history, and it was naturally something that Leyland could not compare to. Yet, Leyland was confident in himself. As long as he advanced to the Morning Star realm, he would not need a long time before the Onyx Castle would be comparable to this ancient blood serpent castle and be a true ancient Magus castle. A large number of carriages were parked at the plaza of the castle, and in the area were many magical creatures. A large number of guests entered from the main gate, and the entire area seemed very lively. Greetings were thrown around audibly on occasion. For someone to come here alone was very rare, and Leyland immediately attracted attention for it. Thankfully, he was famous to begin with, and many members of the organization had seen him before. Even for those who hadn't, there were definitely images and information regarding him. Naturally, he would not be mocked. Leyland, there you are. After some disturbance at the gates, Freya, who was dressed in glamorous attire, came forward to welcome Leyland. Even though they had not met for a very long time, her face still looked childlike, and even though she had the might of a crystal phase Magus, she looked just like a little girl, a huge contrast to her mature and enticing figure. Calling me directly by my name? Am I that close to you? Leyland rolled his eyes internally, but still allowed Freya to affectionately hold his arms as they walked into the castle. This was obviously a signal with an obvious implication. Leyland knew very well that, in Freya's heart, she probably did not have any intentions of giving up on him completely. She had always liked to show how close she was to him at public occasions like these. However, he was just as happy about the situation. This way, there would be fewer female warlocks coming to cause him trouble. Only Miranda would have the guts to fight with Freya over a man. However, after being subdued by Leyland, Miranda had become a lot more down-to-earth. I'm very happy that you're here today. I hope to be able to meet you privately after the banquet and discuss some matters regarding our mentor. She lightly whispered into Leyland's ears and tenderly hugged him before going to entertain other guests. She was the main lead of the event today, and there were many distinguished high-ranked warlocks who had made their way here. Naturally, she could not only accompany Leyland. Mentor? Leyland stroked his chin. From the looks of it, Freya had gained an interest in the rumors regarding the discovery of traces of Purgatory World. However, she seemed concerned as well, and this foresight set her apart from other warlocks. Leyland shrugged his shoulders, looked for a corner, and started to quietly enjoy the delicacies and wine. As fitting of nobles with thousands of years of heritage, the banquet had very sumptuous food, which surpassed Leyland's expectations. "Ha! Leyland, do you like being here alone? Aren't you going to dance?" After sitting for a while on the sofa, Leyland saw a familiar face. The aura of Robin's body was gloomy, and the black marking on his forehead had occupied almost his entire face. It made Leyland rather uncomfortable. He was now smiling at Leyland, holding a crystal glass filled with grape wine. On the other end, many female warlocks wearing revealing clothes shot coquettish glances over. "Senior Robin," Leyland smiled and nodded. "I have no interest in these things. That's not what you said when you were dealing with Miranda previously." Robin smiled and shook his head and sat beside Leyland. Evidently, he had just used the female warlocks as a conversation starter. "The aura on your body has reached a stage where even I can't seem to see through." Robin sized up Leyland and said with a laugh, a glint in his eyes. After being watched this way, Leyland felt chills down his spine. The greediness Robin was concealing well was causing him to feel apprehensive. "Senior Robin, stop joking around. I've merely mastered a few powerful spells recently." Leyland smiled and declined. His skills at altering his aura typically could not be seen through by an ordinary crystal phase Magus, but Robin had managed to do so, which put him on his guard. "Why haven't I seen Noah around?" Leyland immediately diverted the conversation. Robin's eyes registered fondness. Noah has already reached the important milestone in his spiritual forces advancement to the vapor phase. He has been staying back in the family. I would have to congratulate Senior in advance then. Leyland smiled, but yet felt like things were not as simple as how Robin made it out to be. Robin became silent before issuing an invitation. All of us have benefited greatly from the previous expedition. I've recently obtained some new intelligence. What do you think? Are you keen on another one? I am willing to give you 40% of the benefits this time round. Expedition? Where to? Leyland seemed interested as he tilted his body forward slightly. An ancient pocket dimension. I can confidently say it holds an ancient morning star Magus, writings, and might even be related to the ruins of the Quicksand Organization. Robin slightly organized his words. Quicksand Organization? Leyland's eyes lit up, but the alarm bells ringing in his heart had grown extremely loud. After deliberating for a long time, he finally gave a reply. I'm sorry, Senior. I've been conducting an extremely important experiment recently, and I'm afraid I will not be able to head out for long periods of time. The instant after he said this, he felt chills, as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. Oh, what a pity, Robin sighed, then got up and left. However, Leyland could evidently feel the fury Robin was trying to keep in, and many things that were hidden in the dark. What a terrifying man! Leyland heaved a deep sigh of relief after seeing Robin's back. From the looks of it, the trip to the Quicksand Castle has caused a huge change in him. Leyland had a feeling that this Robin was an entirely different person from that passionate and positive man he'd known. However, even if it were the old Robin who had came forth with the invitation, Leyland would probably decline it as well. Currently, he was not short of anything. Since it was very chaotic outside, going out and exploring now would obviously just be a death wish. On top of that, Leyland did not feel at ease with the current Robin. Banquets like those between the elites were relatively boring, at least in Leyland's eyes. Many bloodline elites like to flatter each other and flaunt their wealth, and eventually get themselves drunk. Many good-looking males and females would even cuddle on the stage, and then leave the banquet together and enter designated cubicles. According to rumors, the cubicles had relatively good soundproofing functions, and even if the world were to crumble, the voices within would not be transmitted to the areas outside. The people in the cubicle were therefore free to do whatever they wanted without any worries. The strength Leyland was displaying was that of a hydro-phase Magus. As a marquis of the Ouroboros clan, many high-ranked warlocks would naturally come forth to flirt with him. Even when he tried to hide in a corner, it was hard to get a break with all the coquettish invitations he was getting. Normally, Leyland did not mind playing this game, but after the banquet, he had Freya's private invitation to attend to. Robin's appearance had also caused him to feel uneasy, and that had naturally been a killjoy. It was not until Leyland felt like his facial muscles were cramping from him smiling that the majestic banquet was announced to have ended. This was a celebration meant for just the high-ranked nobility. For the low-ranked warlocks or peasants, they would get to rest for a weekend. Freya's clan would even provide white bread and rum free of charge. From the looks of it, such an auspicious occasion had not occurred in her family for a very long time, hence the need for a large celebration. Leyland did not bother with all of that. After the banquet had ended, under a maid's guidance, he entered the depths of the ancient blood serpent castle. The materials that made up the castle had since experienced many changes due to it receiving the radiation from the many magi that had lived there. The walls were colored a crimson that resembled that of human muscle, and even possessed the same elasticity. The floor was covered with a red carpet, and large mouths emerged from time to time, swallowing the trash in one gulp before licking their lips, as if after a tasty treat. There was not a single ordinary human in the castle. With the exception of the low-ranked warlock maids who were leading Leyland, the majority were slaves of other races. Hovland. Leyland looked at the team of dwarf-like beings bowing to him in shock. Those dwarves were scrawny, but had very sharp ears. Yes, master. The Hovland not only have long lives, they are also outstanding gardeners and chefs, qualified to perform jobs of varying degrees of intensity, and as a bonus, they have a high degree of resistance to radiation. The maid introduced the Hovland to Leyland. I've naturally heard of the slaves used by noble families. Leyland nodded his head. In actual fact, during the construction of Onyx Castle, he had thought of purchasing slaves, but high-quality slaves like these were pretty rare. Only amongst bloodline nobility like Freya's family would one find this many Hovland. Master has been waiting in the study room for you." The maid respectfully opened a walnut wood door and stood by the side. Leyland adjusted his collar before walking in. "Welcome. You haven't seen my study room before, have you?" Freya had changed into a long, loose robe and had casually used a piece of fabric to tighten her robe. Her face was as youthful as ever. "Yes, your huge collection of books is shocking." Leyland nodded his head and pretended not to see Freya's attempts at seduction. He knew very well what he could afford to play around with. For girls like Miranda, it was okay to have sex with them. However, it was different for girls like Freya. Leyland was sure that if he was not prepared to take responsibility after his actions, he would definitely be chased down by the Blood Duchess until he perished. Freya's eyes registered a ray of disappointment, yet she still made a promise. "If you want to, you can flip through any of the books here." "Obstruction and ambush, thank you very much." Leyland smiled widely as he expressed his gratitude. Freya pulled on Leyland's arm as they moved to sit on a long sofa. Leyland's eyebrows furrowed, but not taking such intimate actions to heart. "What exactly did you ask me to come here for?" Leyland thought Freya was not one to look for him because of a small matter. Miranda would be more likely to do that. Once a serious topic was mentioned, all other expressions left Freya's face as she turned solemn. "Do you know about the events related to the Purgatory world?" "As far as I know, the elders seem to have acquired some clues, and now they should be searching for the specific coordinates," Leyland said with an equally strict expression. "Actually, the search has almost been completed. According to my master's plan, I'm afraid we'll all have to go to the headquarters to participate in the experiments." Freya added, smiling bitterly. "This is a responsibility we cannot shirk." Leyland seemed solemn. "It's just that. I have a really bad feeling about this." Worry surfaced on Freya's face. Even in the ancient era, the Purgatory world was a tremendously powerful world, so how is it possible that it would be so easily found? Even if it is found, how would anyone then go past the protectors to enter? "I'm sure the mentors have already considered these questions." Leyland considered his own words as he spoke. "Well, I sure hope so." Freya breathed a long sigh, then suddenly remembered something else. "These days, the outside world does not seem to be at peace. You must be careful. These are for you." Freya pushed a box over to Leyland. Leyland opened it to find numerous glittering and translucent crystals neatly placed inside. Spiritual force crystals, those that have had their markings completely removed. Leyland was taken by surprise. A crystal phase Magus could naturally store and preserve his own crystallized spiritual force and leave these crystals for future use. But for such a pure color to appear meant that Freya not only washed away all the spiritual force inside her crystals, but she also eliminated all her spiritual imprints. To a crystal phase Magus, this was no different from reducing their own spiritual force. Although it wasn't impossible to replenish them, it was still extremely troublesome. Such crystals with their marks removed could be given to other crystal phase magi to use, and could quickly replenish spiritual force. They were rare treasures, and had always been a top-class resource that was only circulated among crystal phase magi. For Freya, someone who had just advanced to the crystal phase, this gift was extremely precious to give. Freya stopped Leyland before he could say anything. "Don't decline it. This is what you deserve." "I have yet to thank you for the bloodline crystals from last time." Leyland remained silent for a while, but eventually managed to speak to express his gratitude. Thank you." A black horse carriage slowly exited from the ancient Blood Serpent Castle's main gate. Inside the magnificent carriage sat Leyland. He was looking at the box in his hand, a bitter smile on his face. "She's very considerate," he sighed lightly. During this period of an unknown crisis, Freya was still able to remember him. This thought inevitably led Leyland's heart to flutter. "In the future, if I have the means, I will definitely help you," Leyland firmly decided in his mind. "Are you certain the target is inside?" Not far away, there were tremors felt on the ground surface. Two shadows dressed in yellow appeared. "It is confirmed. Inside that carriage is the Ouroboros clan's Marquis Leyland." The other figure had a scratchy voice. He. "This is the Magus who the demon hunter put a high price on, and he has hydro-phase strength." The person who spoke first immediately laughed coldly. "Everything is already prepared. Once our target enters the ambush, we spring into action at once." There was a hint of bloodthirst in that scratchy voice. Leyland, who was just resting on the carriage, abruptly opened his eyes, revealing a cheeky smile. "Someone wants to attack me." Although he had not heard the conversation between the two shadows, the AI chip's detection clearly showed that, in the forest not far away, there was a trap. Even if the other party had already carefully set up 3 layers of aura-concealing spell formations, from Leyland's point of view, these spell formations were like sieves that were filled with holes. Especially the radiation from the magi hidden within, that was as obvious as a burning torch in the night. "Julian," he called in a low voice. "What's the matter, Lord Marquis?" The coachman from outside replied immediately. "Maintain the speed. There's a group of friends ahead of us waiting for a greeting." Leyland spoke in a low voice, and he was certain the Magus had already understood what he meant. "Yes, my lord." Upon hearing this piece of news, Julian's voice was still ever so steady, like he was not in the least bit worried. The grand horse carriage proceeded at a constant speed, moving along on the road by the forest as if unaware. A yellow fireball boomed as it crashed down on them, ruining the walls of the carriage and causing it to break apart. The giant rut and the wheels of the carriage flew out. A waft of smoke rose just outside the area, isolating this piece of land from the rest of the world. A few men dressed in black immediately pounced towards the carriage. One of them held a huge hammer up high and smashed down on the carriage directly. The land rumbled as the huge hammer mercilessly crushed the remains of the carriage and created a gigantic pit, as if by an earthquake that sent out strange ripples. "Hey, there's no one." The person who spoke was someone with the voice of a child and the body of a 7 or 8-year-old. Yet he was holding a hammer that was bigger than his own body, making him look a little ridiculous. "Blacksmith Mia, I don't recall there being any grudges between us." Several black tendrils covered the whole area, and Leyland carried the trembling coachman as they walked out of the shadows. "Hee, do I need a reason to kill you?" Mia lifted her hood, revealing a face befitting the body. A face that should have been filled with the joy of a child was instead warped with bloodlust. Blacksmith Mia was the Central Continent's most infamous bandit, a peak crystal phase Magus with countless crimes to her name. Under the guise of a little girl hid a vicious, scary monster. She once used a metal hammer to kill an entire family of magi. Male, female, old, young, no matter who it was, they were simply added to the mountain of flesh. "And I reckon these people are courting death too." Leyland looked around at the other few black shadows. Numerous elemental particles transformed into shields and appeared before him. "Assassin Hill, Brutal Bear Fane." A few of the magi reported their names successively. They were all characters whose names were known far and wide for their notoriety, and they all emitted waves of crystal phase energy. "You sure do think highly of me," Leyland said, smiling while shaking his head. Without warning, he sprung forth violently. "Go to hell." He whirled the coachman who was in his arms upwards, smashing him towards Mia as if he were a sandbag. The numerous potion bottles on him scattered outwards. Rank 3 potion combination spell Divine Prairie Flames. Burning flames immediately formed a wall of fire in front of him, isolating Hill and Fane to one side. On the other end, the coachman who was thrown by Leyland changed in a bizarre manner. Mia, who was standing in front of him, whirled the heavy hammer without regard for anything, trying to smash the coachman into pulp. He pulled out a golden dagger in midair, and his whole temperament instantly changed. The originally timid man turned sinister and crazy, as if a cowardly rabbit transforming into a tiger. "Blacksmith Mia," he laughed coldly. His whole body seemed to have become as flexible as a snake S, and he moved his body in a way no ordinary person would ever be able to as he avoided the huge hammer. In the same instant, he stabbed the dagger right into Mia's chest. Wang! An aura of gold was emitted from Mia's body, but even that was shockingly dimmed as it was stabbed firmly by the dagger. Mia's body went stiff for a split second before her innate defensive spell shattered into pieces under the dagger's attack. Swiftly after, the sharp dagger mercilessly slashed at Mia's skin, and its sharp blade entered right through her chest, ripping through flesh and entering her internals. Seeing the fresh red blood spurting out, the coachman's face instantly revealed joy. And yet, the moment he saw a crazed expression on Mia's face, his heart froze. "Die!" Mia let go of the hammer. Holding onto a dagger, she crashed forward. The sound of bones breaking came from the coachman's body. His face revealed his astonishment as blood flew from his mouth onto the street. "Boneless snake Julian!" Mia's body constantly wiggled, covering and repairing her internal organs and wounds immediately. She looked at Julian with eyes filled with hatred. As expected of the legendary Magus with body refinement, who soaked in the corrosion swamp. To think my strength and magic equipment isn't enough to kill you in one shot. Having been revealed, there were slight alterations to the coachman's face, and hydrophase waves were emitted from his body. He was a Magus as well, or rather, an advanced Magus who had already reached hydrophase. The boneless snake, Julian, was one of Freya's family's most powerful warriors. He was notorious for assassination ability, causing enemies to be terror-stricken at the thought of his existence. Damn it, I knew those bastards' plan was not reliable. Mia's face changed. Retreat immediately. Hill and Fane glanced at each other, doubt surfacing on their faces. Even if Julian and Leyland stood shoulder to shoulder, they were merely two hydro-phase magi. On the other hand, their group had a bunch of crystal phase magi who had been famous for a long time. How could they run away from them with their tails tucked between their legs? But subsequently, their facial expressions drastically changed. PSSSSSD. A menacing blood serpent's shadow abruptly bombarded the surrounding haze. The whole spell formation was immediately breached. Warriors wearing dark red Magus robes with giant Chemian serpent tattoos surrounded the area and covered Leyland, who had just been promoted to the crystal phase. Ouroboros clan warlocks, Hill cried out beneath his breath, knowing that today's business would be hard to handle. Explosion and encirclement, you lot knew our plans from the very beginning. As Mia looked at how they were heavily surrounded, her face turned grim. The fighting strength of high-ranked warlocks, especially that of warlocks like Leyland and Julian, could without a doubt compare to ordinary magi in the crystal phase. The Blood Serpent Warlock organization was the elite force of Freya's family, not something to be trifled with. They were actually dispatched all at once, and were even led by Freya herself, a crystal phase warlock. Due to the additional power from their bloodlines, warlocks were usually stronger than ordinary magi. Once they advanced to the crystal phase, they would immediately be able to compare to peak crystal phase magi. Given all this, it was no wonder that Mia's face looked glum. All of you have been wreaking havoc near the territory of the Ouroboros clan. How can we let all of you go so easily? Freya wore a tight-fitting hunting suit and looked extremely heroic. Of course, that was only if one ignored the childish face. River Agu's warehouse robbery, the extermination of the Rawlythe family, and Count Okta's disappearance. Who exactly is the mastermind behind all these? Freya stared at the three magi, and an extreme feeling of danger overwhelmed her. To subdue and order three vicious magi in the crystal phase was not something that could be done by any ordinary power. With the addition of the chain of events that had occurred recently, Freya had a bad premonition. Just the Ouroboros clan. Mia's group of three magi all registered smiles of disdain. Watch out, lest they... After seeing that smile, Leyland's pupils shrank and he quickly gave a reminder. Boom, boom, boom. Three other rays of black clashed with the Blood Serpent organization like lightning, overcoming the strong obstructions before arriving next to Mia's group. 3. Crystal phase. Freya grit her teeth, and she sounded bitter. Little did she expect that the opponents had reinforcements, which obviously meant that they had made preparations with regards to the plan of hers. She was already at the limit of her current strength in subduing 3 crystal phase magi, but now that there were 3 more, Freya felt her heart sink. What now? If you don't wish for the elites in your family to perish here, then release us now. Mia's voice had a tinge of complacency. That's not enough. He needs to stay. The 3 crystal phase magi who'd appeared afterwards pointed at Leyland. What? Why? Leyland touched his nose. The damage you've done to us is not light, and only the demon hunter's rewards can make up for it. Hill shot Leyland a look before glancing at Freya. He is not a warlock from your family. Miss Freya, I presume you wouldn't want to simply treat us as your enemies just for a member of your organization. Leyland rolled his eyes internally. It would be impossible for discord to be sowed with such simple tactics. However, due to the fact that personal interests were involved, this could bring about more trouble. Thankfully, Leyland had not planned to put his own safety in the hands of others and had backup plans already. The demon hunter, Freya muttered to herself. She had heard of how Leyland and a few others had offended that particular Morning Star Magus. If those crystal phase fugitives were under the demon hunter's wings, it would be understandable. Many of the warlocks thought of that point, and after hearing Hill's words, they looked at Leyland in a different light. Even though they belonged to the same organization, and they'd had some friendly interactions before, Leyland was simply not important enough for them to offend a Morning Star Magus without hesitation. Morningstar Magi in the central continent had power and status, and their dignity could not be infringed upon lightly. Even though the two organizations were hostile, they hadn't yet completely fallen out with each other. As a result, many of the Warlocks thought that it was worth it to give up Leyland to get on Cyril's good side. A few Warlocks immediately distanced themselves from Leyland. This included the very Julian who had been fighting at his side all this while. Freya's face immediately registered a change. She grit her teeth as she looked at the numerous Warlocks from her family. Leyland is a marquis of our clan, we will never hand him over. Master! A clamor was started amongst the Warlocks. From their point of view, their family did not have to do so much for an outsider. My decision is firm. All of you, quickly get out of my territory, or else you'll come to regret it, Freya said firmly. The one who will come to regret it will be you. Mia said furiously, and together with the 5 figures behind her, turned to leave. Wait a minute! Just when the Blood Serpent organization had made a path, an ill-timed voice sounded that caused both parties to look around. Leyland, don't do anything rash. Freya's voice betrayed her anxiety. Even though they were related by bloodline, the Ouroboros clan was divided into many factions that competed with each other. This was the most she could do for Leyland. Were he to go and provoke them without discrimination, Freya would not risk the danger of her family's elimination to accompany him. She looked at Leyland's back and bit her lips. What? Youngster, you're lucky today to be able to hide under the skirt of a woman. Next time you won't be so lucky. Mia raised her giant hammer and threatened him. 3 crystal phase magi for the ambush and another 3 as backup. This should be the limits of your strength. A blue light shone in Leyland's eyes as he sighed. Don't use the hunter as a facade, he's not fit for that. What did you just say? Fury appeared on the faces of some of the crystal phase magi. What I'm saying is that you have to stay here today. There's no escaping from that, even if you're using the name of a morning star Magus. Leyland's tone was light, but seemed to emphasize his words. At the same time, a mountainous might instantly erupted from his body. Crystal phase. How long have you been? Freya covered her mouth in extreme shock. Giant Chem-In serpent warlocks would typically depend on the accumulation of time to make a breakthrough via their bloodlines. Freya's own breakthrough to the crystal phase at her age had deemed her a genius. But Leyland, he was only 200 years old, and yet had already broken through the bottleneck to the crystal phase. Freya immediately thought of the changed situation on the battlefield after Leyland revealed his strength. The other party had a total of 6 crystal phase magi, and Freya's side had 2 with the addition of Leyland Julian, and the other members of her organization could at most resist the attacks of 3 crystal phase magi. Overall, their strength was still lower than that of their opponents. Of course, in that case, for the other party to want to cause great damage to Freya's team, their chances at succeeding would be greatly minimized. With the small disparity in strength and the apprehensions about damages on both sides, ordinary threats would have no effects. I'll deal with these 3 crystal phase magi. You can settle the remaining ones right. Leyland had undone the pretense of the transfiguration spell and had released his entire strength without any qualms as he pointed to Mia's initial group of 3. No problem. With Freya's crystal phase strength and the addition of Julian and the Blood Serpent Warlock organization's support, to annihilate the 3 magi would not be a problem. It would only be a matter of time. But are you sure you're up to it? Freya glanced at Leyland, and in her eyes was worry that she could not conceal. After all, the enemies were crystal phase magi as well. Ha! Don't worry. Leyland laughed, and numerous black flames shot out like arrows as they trapped Mia, Hill, and Fane within. He actually wanted to, in one move, deal with 3 magi that were similar in strength to him together. I'll grant your death wish. Just nice. My bloodthirsty hammer lacks the spiritual wailing of a crystal phase Magus. Mia smiled coldly as she rushed forward with the metal hammer. Bam! The heavy hammer rippled with terrifying amounts of energy, creating a huge crater on the ground. Alas, who only uses brute force. I happen to detest beings like these lately. Leyland's silhouette grew translucent, giving off a glow which swiftly appeared before Mia. I cannot stand you, but it's a piece of cake to subdue you. Leyland's eyes registered coldness. A black ray slowly appeared from his hands. Fatality's tip. The black ray of death tunneled through the hammer and the innate defensive spells, shooting at Mia's forehead like black lightning. When it exited, it brought with it a large amount of blood as well as brain matter. Bang. It was not until Mia's corpse fell to the ground that Hill and Fane reacted to it. What had they seen? The famed Mia, who was known for her hammer, someone at the peak of the crystal phase, died at the hands of her opponent. The two had not even dueled for a few seconds. Could it be that he has already advanced to the Morning Star realm? All of a sudden, an idea that shocked the two appeared within their thoughts, which instantly caused their limbs to become colder. Leyland himself had not expected the effects of the sudden attack to be so successful as well. He had originally already reached the state of a rank 3 hydro phase Magus, and with his bloodline strength matured to an extent, he had managed to prematurely reach his limits now together with the help of the Lamia fingerbone. Currently, he not only had a terrifying spiritual force, his other credentials had far surpassed that of ordinary crystal phase magi by a huge margin. This terrifying strength had the support of the powerful spell tailored for him by the AI chip, Fatality's Tip. All the factors had come together, and perhaps with the help of Mia's complacency, he had managed to achieve such success. Even Leyland himself was grateful for this stroke of luck that arrived just in time. It seems that in my current state, few can match up to me unless they're at or above the Morning Star realm. Leyland looked at the venue, which had instantly quieted down, and let out a sigh of relief. What are you looking at? Freya was distracted for only a short while before she instantly ordered the gathering of the Blood Serpent Warlocks. Leyland's terrifying outburst had allowed her to see hope for subduing and annihilating the opponents here. The thought of her earlier humiliation seemed to have triggered the adventurer in her. Invincible, surround them. Formation number 2. Under Freya's command, the Blood Serpent organization firmly trapped the 3 other crystal phase magi in a formation. With their own strength and the assistance of Julian's expertise in sneak attacks, the 3 crystal phase magi in the formation were immediately surrounded by danger. It's your turn now. Seeing that the 3 magi had no hope of escaping, Leyland turned towards Hill and Fane on the opposite end, a brilliant smile spreading across his face. To the 2 magi on the other end, though this smile was more frightening than that of a demon's. Upon seeing Leyland's grin, they knew that he definitely would not let them off, and immediately rushed to take action first. The moment Hill had that thought, numerous black thorns instantly appeared, bursting forth in the blink of an eye. Umbra Sting! The many sharp thorns screeched across the sky and scattered down like a torrential rain of spikes. Useless! A layer of dense scales emerged on Leyland's body. All that the thorns could do on collision with these scales was make a loud noise before snapping apart, merely causing white specks to appear on the black scales. Leyland's physique had always been extremely shocking, and the current him could practically fight against any rank 1 or rank 2 Magus with his body alone. With the addition of the Chemian scales that strengthened his defense, even if he went up against a rank 3 Magus in the crystal phase, any spells used against him would have nearly no effect unless they were prepared over a long time. In the middle of the black rain, Leyland seemed to have transformed into a giant savage beast, advancing while sheltered from the numerous sparks. This ferocious posture instantly scared the wits out of the 2 magi. What we do now? Quick, think of something. Hill shouted at Fane next to him, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. He was very clear on how terrifying the effects of his spell were, but the other party had unexpectedly resisted it with a mere layer of scales. How strong was his body? Perhaps only the legendary Morning Star Magi, whose bodies had been transformed by soul force, could compare to him. Gaia's cage! Fane did not waste any time either. A multitude of yellow crystals appeared around him as he muttered a long, unintelligible chant without pause. When he was done chanting, the earth shook, causing the soil to disintegrate and reveal a sparkling jade structure within. A cage brimming with the resplendent radiance of a gem suddenly fell upon Leyland, covering him and trapping him inside. Earth elves! Listen to my instructions, bury him completely in the abyss. A cheery look briefly appeared on Fane's face before he hurriedly started casting more spells as numerous rays of dull yellow light flashed. Large amounts of soil coagulated to form an even bigger rock that buried him inside. The earth even started to crack apart as though wanting to swallow up the cage deep into itself. Well done, Fane! Hill, who was on the other side, immediately yelled excitedly, but then saw his comrade's forced smile. Be careful. He's struggling inside. I can't control it any longer. Following loud thumps that made one's heart palpitate, the numerous rocks swelled and broke apart to form huge cracks. The many cracks then connected to each other, and broken rocks suddenly fell everywhere, as though there was a dreadful creature locked up inside that was struggling so hard with mere brute force that the entire cage seemed to have gotten misshaped. With every thump, Fane's expression grew a little paler, as though he was getting punched hard. By the end of his chant, he spat out large mouthfuls of fresh blood and almost looked like he was dead. The seal, Fane tried his best to say as blood gushed out in large amounts from the corner of his mouth. Boom, the very mountains shook and the huge cage of rock was sent into the cracks just before everything completely fell apart. The earth slowly closed up. Great! Hill cheered, finally managing to let his guard down. Thump. At this moment, he saw his comrade Fane faint, as though he had already used up all of his energy. Don't worry, buddy, I'll take you away now. Hill's eyes flickered in multiple colors. Peering over at the few black silhouettes belonging to the Blood Serpent Warlock organization who were not far away, he gritted his teeth and left quickly. Master! Julian looked over at the location where Leyland had been buried. Aren't we going to help? Don't worry. That fellow has never been blocked by an obstacle. He definitely still has something up his sleeve. Freya rolled her eyes. Why are you speaking up for him all of a sudden? You clearly approved of the ceasefire previously. That was when I didn't know that the other party was so perverse. Julian secretly criticized, but did not dare to express it in words. Lord Leyland actually revealed his true ability and will likely be the biggest hope in our clan. It will definitely grant him a status much higher than before. The highest authority in the Ouroboros clan belonged to the 3 Morning Star Warlock elders, followed by a whole bunch of bloodline marquises, among whom the ownership was split. But Julian knew that above these ordinary bloodline marquises were actually a special group of people. They were young warlocks, children who had already achieved the crystal phase and had hopes of advancing to the Morning Star realm. Such people were few and far between in the entire Ouroboros clan. Their status was only lower than that of the few rank 4 warlocks, and they were provided with the best resources, aiming for nothing less than advancing to Morning Star. Although Robin was Gilbert's main steward, his actual position was previously lower than these seeds by a notch. Of course, after getting some unknown profits, his strength had improved tremendously, and upon entering the crystal phase, Robin was on par with the others. Now that Leyland had shown that his potential was not inferior to Robin's, exceeding it in fact, he would definitely receive more attention from Duke Gilbert. Now it seems that when Master met him for the first time, you had already discovered that he wasn't ordinary. Your foresight indeed exceeds that of an average person. Julian expressed his respect sincerely, making Freya blush. You want to leave? Have you even asked me? Boom. The rock exploded, exposing a deep gaping hole in the ground. Black figure forced his way out recklessly, causing rocks to fly everywhere. Leyland. Hill gazed at Fane, who had already fainted on the ground, but couldn't even bring himself to cry. At the bottom of his heart, he had already cursed at the people in charge who initially made this plan. How stupid were they to have put their sights on Leyland, such a ferocious person. But he didn't have much chance to think about it. Leyland, who was exuding a brazen aura, had already appeared in front of him. My lord, spare us. Hill's voice distorted, and various accessories on his person exploded, forming many layers of radiant armor that floated around his body. When you dared to ambush me back then, you should have expected to be killed. Leyland's was callous. In a situation where Morning Star Magi would not appear, there were few things that could constrain him. After all, since he was unable to continue hiding his strength, he had to ruthlessly display it and intimidate the rest who wanted to go against him. Thump! A black fist attacked the outermost barrier of light, smashing it into pieces. The other layers of defense immediately started tottering, on the verge of collapse. My lord, I am willing to reveal the mastermind behind all this. Hill gritted his teeth and finally pulled out his trump card. Not interested. Leyland really was not interested in probing behind the scenes. War was almost upon them, and it would be easiest to build an atmosphere full of panic by assassinations and by getting rid of the other party's weaker troops. He didn't want to be implicated and end up provoking a Morning Star Magus. Right now, as long as he firmly broke the claws that the other party was reaching out with, it would be enough. After sorting out his thoughts, Leyland appeared even more apathetic and was indifferent to the other party's pleas for forgiveness. He eventually ripped apart Hill's innate defense under his despairing gaze. A sinister-looking head fell onto the ground with a thump, even as the body it was previously attached to let loose a shower of blood. It looked like a red fountain had erupted. As for this, I'll leave it to her. Leyland instantly thought of Freya. Fane, who was still unconscious and lying on the ground, would still take some effort to deal with. Upon inspection, he discovered that Fane's spiritual force had been exhausted and swiftly removed all of his spatial objects before forcing his consciousness shut. With his magic equipment and potions all taken away, and his spiritual force sealed, even if Fane was a Magus in the crystal phase, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Hiss. On the other end of the battlefield, in the spell formation formed by the Blood Serpent organization, the battle was at its most heated moment. Although the Blood Serpent organization was comprised of the elites of Freya's family, who were also proficient in many types of formations, Freya had discovered to her surprise that the 3 crystal phase magi were also experts in all kinds of terrifying secret techniques. Through combining their strength, those magi had managed to survive the assault of her troops until now, even if they were trapped in a formation. The 3 crystal phase magi in front of Freya had now morphed into a monster. This monster was thrice the size of a normal human, had 3 heads and 6 arms, and its body was covered with moving black runes. It looked as though it was a fusion of the 3 magi. The head of an elderly man placed right in the center opened its eyes and issued its last warning to Freya. "Let us go. You don't want to pay the price for detaining us. Don't trust him." A corner of the spell formation split apart, allowing a ray of light to enter. Leyland stood beside Freya. "Hill and company have already been completely destroyed, and you still wish to leave. Dream on." Leyland naturally reprimanded his enemies without restraint. Seeing that the fused magi appeared to have made suspicious movements, Leyland immediately turned to Freya. "You're in charge of controlling the spell formation. I'll take care of the front," he said, and then dashed away. The spell formation of the Warlock organization was not bad, but Leyland was clear that what it lacked was a pivot who would dare to fight against the other party head-on. His rays of death had been prepared long ago, flickering with a dreadful luster. Enforcer, due to the sudden incident, Leyland's return was delayed, and he returned to the ancient Blood Serpent Castle to rest. "Thank you so much for what you did this time." Freya sat beside Leyland and personally poured tea for him, her face full of gratitude. It was evident that the opponents had come for the ancient Blood Serpent Castle, and attacking Leyland was only an afterthought. If not for Leyland's help, the 6 crystal phase magi would have attacked together. The castle might not have been able to defend against such an abrupt attack, and there might have been colossal damages. "That's nothing much. Friends should help each other," Leyland smiled. "Just friends." A gleam of disappointment shone across Freya's face. The sudden turn of the situation made Leyland feel somewhat awkward, and he tried to divert the conversation elsewhere. Were any of the other guests present, they wouldn't have stood the savage behavior of those fugitives either. During the battle the previous day, other than Fane, who had been taken captive by Leyland, all the 5 crystal phase magi had perished. The announcement of those horrifying battle results had rendered many people speechless and had caused a lot of commotion in the Ouroboros clan headquarters. The only captive, Fane, was naturally sent back to the headquarters. In the meanwhile, Leyland would have the lion's share of the spoils of war. Compared to Freya, who had to look after her family clan, Leyland had much less pressing on his mind. Whatever he had acquired belonged to him alone, and he had indeed managed to get a huge sum. And there were even more surprises in store for him. The only thing Leyland could not understand was why Freya did not invite the other guests to assist in subduing the opponents. If only she had invited more high-ranking warlocks, Leyland would not have to be forced to reveal his true powers. Them. Freya smiled wryly and actually looked pitiful. Upon seeing her expression, Leyland immediately went silent, guessing what had happened. Freya had definitely discarded quite a few people in the past, offending them while under the wings of a strong, protective mentor. At this point in time, those people most likely hoped for her to mess up. Furthermore, there were many factions in Ouroboros clan, and recently there had been immense tension between them. The environment had given rise to an unstable situation. Power conflicts tended to be more horrifying than battles. Freya could not find even a single person she was confident would aid her. "Is the situation already that bad?" Leyland stroked his chin. "Yes, you're the only one I trust now." Freya's eyes became red as she leant her head on Leyland's shoulders. "Wait a moment." Leyland smiled wryly as he shook his head. "I can understand your need to rant. But what's the point of placing mistletoe powder in the candle? The mistletoe was a cherished plant in the Magus world. Seen as a symbol of making love and giving birth, its powder was commonly used to make enticing medicine. For magi, it even had the mystical power of increasing impregnation rates, and hence was in excessive demand. Freya held her breath as she sat in a corner. Her face did not reveal any sense of embarrassment, but was only tinged with anger. Since she knew that Leyland was a potions grandmaster, and had techniques that could protect his seeds of life that even Miranda was unable to do anything about, she would naturally not make a forceful move, and instead leave obvious hints. And yet Leyland acted like a fool. It infuriated her so much that she didn't want to be near him. "Master, news has arrived from headquarters." At that moment, the gates opened and Julian walked in, something that resolved the awkward situation. "No one here is an outsider. Go ahead," Freya nodded. In front of others, she had reinstated her prestige. Julian shot Leyland a glance. A sudden realization flashed across his eyes, but his face remained solemn. "According to the orders of the headquarters, Sir Leyland is to become an enforcer of the Ouroboros clan and will be in charge of patrolling all the regions under our control. He has the powers to attack any royals under the rank of Marquis. Even if it's a Marquis, he has the rights to imprison them. That, Freya could not believe it. They just want to put you in a spot." She could see through the intentions of such an arrangement by the high-ranking officials. "But I have no other choice, do I?" Leyland shrugged his shoulders. "According to the orders from the headquarters, Marquis, you have to accept the appointment as soon as possible." Julian bowed slightly. The powers of an enforcer of the Ouroboros clan would naturally be great, but if he was not mindful, he could potentially offend many people. This did not bode well for Leyland's future prospects, but since it was an order, it indicated that the internal affairs of the Ouroboros clan were not too good, to the extent that they had to rely on Leyland to clean up the system. "From the looks of it, I'll have to leave." Leyland got up and gave Freya a hug. "I'm going. I'll be heading over to the headquarters to find Mentor sometime soon as well. Please be careful." Freya's eyes actually did turn red this time round. "Don't worry, there are few people who can scheme against me now." Leyland laughed with confidence. Phosphorescent swamp within the Ouroboros clan headquarters. Gilbert's living quarters were small and narrow like before. The walls on two sides even had some green mold growing on them. If he had not been to the basement, even Leyland would not have believed that this was the residence of a Morningstar Magus. Leyland saw Duke Gilbert in the study room, not a single strand of hair on his face or head. "Mentor," he respectfully bowed. You've actually advanced to the crystal phase. Not bad, not bad." Gilbert nodded his head, his gaze scanning across Leyland's body like a ray of lightning. "I was just lucky." Leyland obviously would not agree, and he pushed all the credit on to so-called luck. Thankfully, Gilbert did not continue questioning him either. He held a goose hairpen and started writing on a piece of parchment paper, eventually leaving a marking on the paper using his own secret imprint. "This is for you. From today, you are the enforcer of the Ouroboros clan." Gilbert passed Leyland the freshly written appointment letter, and his face broke into a sarcastic laugh. "Our organization has had some matters popping up internally lately. They require your attention." "Understood, Mentor." Leyland let out a long, deep sigh inside. If this was in the past, Gilbert would obviously get to the bottom of things. Even though Leyland had prepared a corresponding response, he had not expected Gilbert to let things off so lightly. Looking at how Gilbert hadn't even taken his biochemical clothing off completely, Leyland's heart throbbed. He asked, "About the purgatory world?" We have already discovered its direction, and we need only spend a bit more time to get its coordinates." Gilbert's eyes lit up, showing his celebratory mood. "The 1,000-year search by the Ouroboros clan will finally see an end. We only need to enter the purgatory world before we chem-in warlocks won't have to worry about the problem of our bloodlines declining. There's even the potential to break through the bloodline shackles and advance to a higher rank." Leyland remained silent and looked at his mentor, who was beaming with joy, unable to bring himself to say a word. He had the AI chip as his trump card and the hopes of the Twilight Zone's icy world. He naturally wasn't like the Ouroboros clan warlocks, who had a deeper understanding of the pains brought forth by the bloodline shackles. From the looks of it, 1,000 years of hope had caused Gilbert to finally drown himself in jubilation. For the three elders, all the battles were simply nonsensical. Even if the Ouroboros clan was to perish in front of the purgatory world, it seemed to have no weight. As a result, Gilbert had allowed him to pass the ordeal so easily. All right, get down to doing it soon. You can seek help from Lucian and Robin if need be. I still have experiments to work on. Gilbert's experiment was obviously very pressing. Even during his short conversation with Leyland, the secret imprint on his hands had lit up quite a few times. He eventually chased Leyland out, certainly on his way back to the laboratory. God knows why, but upon seeing Gilbert like that, Leyland felt a sense of pressure. Greed drove one to madness before it drove them to death. This was a maxim from his previous life, but one that was still applicable in the situation now. Since war was about to break out, the few Morning Star Warlocks had actually cooped themselves up at home, which resulted in their opponents brazenly taking up the offense. Leyland smiled wryly internally, and yet had no solution to offer. Since the Morning Star forces had chosen not to show their faces, it was hard for the subordinates to do anything, and now that Gilbert had actually passed on a portion of the authority to him, it was obviously a difficult task. Parker, bring along my capable subordinates and rush to the headquarters quickly. Gilbert had only given him a position, but had not allocated any subordinates to him, which had rendered Leyland speechless. Fortunately, within his own territory, he had nurtured a few talents, and now was the time he could put them to good use. Chem-in Warlock marquises were like feudal lords in the Ouroboros clan, and had many warlocks seeking refuge from them. Should there be more time, Leyland could even build an elite warlock team himself, which he believed would not be inferior to the Blood Serpent organization. As you wish, Master. Parker's voice from the secret technique imprint was firm and determined. He had obviously received some news already. Very good. I'll be waiting for you in the manor. After a few words, Leyland ended the call. As a Marquis, he had a huge manor in the Ouroboros clan headquarters. Even though the facilities could not measure up to that of the Magus Tower and Onyx Palace, it was sufficient for an ordinary high-ranking warlock to use. What's more important was that the facilities were all complimentary, and Leyland did not have to pay a single penny. As a result, Leyland had kept the manor and treated it as his residence in the headquarters. After sending away the two warlocks who were looking after things, he went into his bedroom and entered deep thought. A while later, he waved his arms and numerous objects appeared. Many of them had terrifying magic powers. In an instant, the entire room started to glow. Those were all his spoils of war. The opponents this time round were a bunch of crystal phase magi who were relatively affluent. It had given Leyland a pleasant surprise. Annihilator glancing through the many pieces of magic equipment and precious materials, Leyland set his gaze on a pile of crystals. These were all pure spiritual force crystals. On their surfaces, he could faintly feel the energy of elemental particles. Crystal phase magi had the tendency to stockpile their crystallized spiritual force. In times of need, they would use them to replenish their own spiritual force or trade them for something else due to their value. Leyland's move had been quick and violent, leaving no opportunity for the opposite side to use such tactics. Compared to the spiritual force crystals gifted by Freya, these crystals were obviously unclean and had to be processed before use. Crystal phase spiritual force crystals. Leyland stroked his chin, and a tube of golden blood appeared in his hand. It's unexpected that I managed to gather these two items so quickly. I guess I'll just go ahead and carry out Quicksand's experiment. Leyland sighed, and his eyes flashed with a dark solemnness. His harvest from Quicksand Castle had been much greater than just the Lamia fingerbone. After he finished deciphering the experimental procedures, the great amount of data became useful for his own bloodline research. Over the past century, he digested it all, and even improved on some of it. The technique of preserving his genes was just a marginal result of the experiment. In fact, Leyland felt that his research into bloodlines was amongst the best in the entire Ouroboros clan, just below that of the elders. And one of his experiments involved a method of igniting a warlock's bloodline to strengthen them. Leyland had kept this experiment top secret, unwilling to perform it even after he advanced to the crystal phase. The effect of the first ignition would be the best, and subsequent ones would progressively decrease in value. Hence, Leyland planned to use his first ignition to break through the bottleneck to the Morning Star realm. Of course, one measly experiment would not be able to propel him to rank 4. Moreover, he was only at the beginning of the crystal phase, so he hadn't even reached the threshold for advancement. There was an enormous gap between rank 3 magi and those at the Morning Star realm. There was an abundance of magi in the central continent, yet morning stars remained few and far between, their positions envied by all. Igniting one's bloodline had the potential to boost one's strength greatly, and even that had slim chances of facilitating a breakthrough. Still, this bloodline experiment wasn't the only trick Leyland had up his sleeve. My accumulations to advance to rank 3 have been progressing well. I have to start considering the next stage, Morning Star. Leyland stroked his chin, evidently pleased. The central continent was currently in a dire state, especially the Ouroboros clan. Not only were there disturbances on the borders, many families had perished and core members had gone missing. These disastrous events were a bad omen for the future. Amidst such chaos, the best defense one could rely on was their own ability. I'm sure Mentor Gilbert and the other two have already been alerted about the circumstances. Why are they yet to make a move? Leyland muttered under his breath. Suddenly, he thought about his own appointment as an enforcer. Perhaps they were aware of it and had secret plans of their own that I might have missed noticing it. Time crawled on as he waited in silence. Later, Leyland welcomed the presence of his own bodyguards. Boosting his own confidence was the presence of Lucien. Do you really wish to do that? Lucien stood in front of Leyland, unable to mask his astonishment. After finding out that the current Leyland had advanced and was on par with him at the crystal phase, he sighed in his heart. This junior only needed 100 years to catch up to his level. His talent exceeded any member the organization had ever seen, even in Morning Star seeds. And yet, compared to the temperamental Robin, Leyland, whose potential was much higher, remained humble and earnest. Lucien found this extremely admirable. If we investigate further, the number of people implicated in this will increase. Although Mentor ordered me to assist you, Lucien, after seeing the current Leyland, felt that this junior ought to have wholeheartedly entered seclusion, waiting for an opportunity to break through the Morning Star bottleneck instead of focusing on such small matters. He wondered what his mentor was thinking. Thoughts about Gilbert made Lucien heave a big sigh. To these high-ranking giant Chem-In serpent warlocks, the allure of the purgatory world was much too huge, and they couldn't help but be engrossed in their search. Thinking about the recent situations and Leyland's terrifying military power, Lucien heaved another big sigh. I'm in charge of information in the clan. I can give you anything you need. My only wish is for you to not get yourself involved. Lucien smiled bitterly, took out a translucent crystal ball, and handed over to Leyland. As an enforcer, it is imperative that I locate the rebels and all the disruptive elements hidden in the Ouroboros clan and get rid of them. Leyland smiled faintly, as if he was not affected by Lucien's words. But once his spiritual force entered the crystal ball, his face changed. The situation has deteriorated to such an extent. He looked up in disbelief and glared at Lucien. Yes. He answered after a heartbeat. The chaotic power struggles are not confined to the border regions. Even internally, some ambiguous problems have cropped up. Some of the clans and families especially, their betrayal is pretty much confirmed. This top-secret information was only available to Leyland because he currently held the position of an enforcement officer. If it were in the past, when he only held the position of a marquis, he wouldn't have access to such things. What exactly is Mentor doing? The thought left a bitter taste in Leyland's mouth. There's no need for excessive worry. As long as we don't lose our main base at Phosphorescent Swamp, given the presence of the 3 elders, we of the Ouroboros clan will never be vulnerable and weak. Leyland let loose a long sigh before he stood up. I want the list of confirmed traitors. All right, I'll ready them immediately, Lucien promised. What do you plan to do? No matter what, since they have the audacity to betray the organization, they will have to pay the price. Leyland spoke with a steely voice. With his men behind him, he headed out. The Stewart family at the Stewart Mountain Range. Black fires were blazing furiously. A large number of high-ranking warlocks were surrounding a huge, mountainous, brutal bear. Behind the bear was a fort that was half built into the cliffside. Enforcer Leyland, I demand an explanation for this. In the middle of the castle, the silhouette of an old Magus appeared. It entered the sky, becoming a huge projection. Even though you are an enforcer, you do not have the authority to besiege the castle of a marquis. The illusory image of the old man roared in his hoarse voice. Authority? Only the weak will abide by such rules and regulations while wishing that their predators would abide by them in this way too. By placing your hopes on such enforcements is truly foolish, Leyland sneered. Still, on the account of the other men that went on this mission with him, he decided to explain further. If I have to give you an explanation, it would be your betrayal of the organization. That is why all these warlocks are out to kill you, and that is why you cannot escape your fate. Rubbish. Having his biggest secret exposed, the Magus acted like he knew nothing and was hearing it for the first time. Veins popped out of his flushed neck and he fumed with anger. True or false, we'll know after you surrender. Leyland's face was emotionless. A brilliant ray of black ripped through the vast sky and streaked across the brutal bear's head mercilessly. Bang! The huge mountainous brutal bear's head was cracked open like a watermelon. So long as they are from the Stewart family, we have orders to kill them without exception. Property and assets will also be confiscated. We'll be given bonuses of equivalent value, Parker ordered clearly. Those warlocks thirsty for achievements, and those who longed for the huge payout from the mission, howled and dashed forward. Seeing Snoopy taking the lead and defeating one Magus after the other, some even dying on the spot, Leyland couldn't help but nod his head. The reason he'd taken on the job of enforcer, other than to acquire the huge wealth of the rebels, was for him to bring his men together for a round of actual field training. The bloody battle of magic and death carried on for a short while. 10 or so minutes later, Parker grabbed the Magus that had been speaking from the fort and pulled him out. With the matter settled, he stood in front of Leyland and reported like a loyal, long-time butler. Except for this old man, all surviving members of the Stewart family had been wiped out. Well done. Leyland looked at the high-ranking warlock on the ground. The opposite party evidently had the giant Chemian serpent bloodline in him too, yet when he saw Leyland, he began to shiver. Do you feel resentment, desperation? Leyland stepped up, provoking the old Magus. Hopefully the next time before your soul is destroyed, you should use some brains. Thud. After Leyland was done speaking, the chief's head fell to the ground, staining it red. A total of 3 giant Chemian serpent families have been wiped out, along with their supplementary small-scale families and other influences. I think we'll have some peace for a while now. Standing at the edge of the overhanging cliff, Leyland glanced at the result of the destruction caused by many magi, involuntarily heaving a sigh of relief. Only a while. Standing by the side, Parker smiled bitterly. After numerous episodes, Leyland's reputation had spread everywhere. With his formidable strength that could even slay Crystal Phase chiefs, he'd immediately established his status. Soon after, through the ruthless means of wiping out entire families and clans, Leyland's fame as an enforcer became even more widespread. Thus, he was labeled Annihilator. 3 helpers no matter what, with Leyland happily going on a killing spree, the internal affairs of the Ouroboros clan stabilized despite the general unrest. Leyland guessed that this had more to do with how the opposing Morning Star powers had yet to make their move. Without these insider spies, it would take more effort to create chaos within the inner circles of the Ouroboros clan, which was currently already on the alert. With these achievements, his reputation soared not only within the Ouroboros clan, but even in the nearby regions. After the Stewart family is destroyed, we can take a small break. Leyland sighed and asked Parker, how is it going at Senior Robin's side? After taking on his role as an enforcer, Leyland was stunned at the realization that this senior of his had accepted the responsibility from Gilbert before him, and was leading his family and pushing down all rebellions. In addition, there were rumors that Leyland's senior had a large change of personality. Not only did he like to torture his enemies, he even enjoyed eating human flesh. Upon hearing this, Leyland's heart sank. Though it was terrifying when bloodline issues acted up in high-ranked warlocks, Robin's behavior had surpassed the pattern of any problems arising from bloodline. Mentor might have wanted to capitalize on his insanity, which is why he arranged for him to purge the inner regions. Leyland took in a deep breath. Compared to him, Robin was going too far. Leyland had merely destroyed families where there was conclusive evidence against them, but Robin went even further. If he had the slightest suspicion at all, the entire family would be purged by him mercilessly. Even a few bloodline noble families who had a deep connection with Robin's own thus lost their inheritance. Through the list of families Robin had destroyed, Leyland made a discovery. Robin seemed to only to have an interest in pure-blooded families, and the higher the purity, the more pitiful their deaths were. Even their corpses were not complete. Knowing all this, Leyland felt a chill as he put two and two together. Though he knew he wasn't the best person in the world, he was still better than Robin. He wouldn't do anything so disgusting. Complaints against Robin are becoming more widespread. Who knows, we might need to stop him next. Leyland smiled wryly at Parker. Robin is Masters Senior. I believe Duke Gilbert wouldn't do this, Parker consoled him. I hope so, Leyland sighed. A distance away, many white dandelions fell down like snowflakes, flying freely atop the ancient castle that had already been ruined. Night fell, and outside what had been the castle, Leyland's vassals set up simple tents. Iron pots bubbled with meat soup and large amounts of mushrooms, giving off a tempting aroma. A merry atmosphere permeated the camp. The plan had gone quite well. Though Leyland planned to train his vassals this way, he still made his move when the casualties were about to be too high. Hence, they had not suffered much and instead reaped massive gains. For this reason, they were motivated to continue striving on. Even the most ferocious Warlock was full of admiration when gazing at Leyland's tent at the heart of the camp. They had been with Leyland for the longest period of time, and could be said to be the people who knew Leyland the best out of everyone in the Ouroboros clan. It was because they knew the terrifying strength of their master that they held reverence for him. Of course, he did not put too much thought into this. As long as he maintained his crushing strength, these vassals would follow him for their entire life. Within the tent, Leyland was half lying on the ground, dressed in tight black clothing. His hands were held behind his back in a strange position. There were a few strange runes written on his body with blood. Buzzing sounds were produced from Leyland's lips from time to time, his entire body slightly moving along to a rhythm. During this process, threads of mysterious energy seemed to be pulled from the air, disappearing into Leyland's limbs. This process continued for almost an hour. Only then did Leyland stand up, taking a look at his hands. A prompt popped up at this moment. Host body completed a cycle of multi-limb strength. Vitality increased by 0.5, no changes to strength. Estimated that in 20 days and 13 hours, host body's vitality will increase by 6.7 and strength by 2.1. This progress is not bad. Watching his stats that were refreshed again, Leyland couldn't help but nod. Multi-limb strength was a cultivation technique he had gathered from the race in the Blackrain world. Though the Morning Star Realm chief had purposely left out a lot of things, the complete version of this path to strength was completely deduced, with the AI chip organizing the data and making inferences. Toughening his body with this method, Leyland found that his body, which had already developed to the maximum, now held the possibility of advancing even further. Though this increase was small, it was enough for him to be happy. Furthermore, with multi-limb strength, the toughness and coordination of his body had increased by a whole level. He could even launch a physical attack similar to that of an ancient giant beast. This coordination, when paired with the night techniques Leyland had previously learned, turned his body into a frightful killing machine. Still, these were all just serendipitous. What Leyland focused on was the increased multi-limb strength gave to his vitality. The corporeal body sustained the spirit. If spiritual force was said to be water, then a Magus body would be the cup. The larger and sturdier the cup, the more liquid it could contain. Leyland was still unable to peep at the Morning Star Realm, but after reaching the crystal phase, what he needed to do was continuously increase his vitality and accumulate spiritual force. Once enough had been gathered, his crystallized spiritual force would eventually condense to form point mass. The point mass represented everything to a Magus. It represented their journey, bloodline, strength, and even soul. Hence, this process was irreversible. The moment the ascension to the Morning Star Realm failed, and the point mass grew unstable, a terrifying explosion might occur. If a Magus encountered such a situation, they would be left without a corpse. Historically, the Magi who failed to ascend to the Morning Star Realm and fell far outnumbered those that had succeeded. Wondering about his future path, Leyland's expression changed as he asked the AI chip a question. How is the simulation of information regarding the Morning Star Realm going? Simulation is 13.5% complete. Unable to process deeper calculations without concrete data, the AI chip robotically answered. If he could gain an understanding of the Morning Star Realm now, it would be incomparably useful to Leyland's advancement. However, it was difficult to meet with Morning Star Magi, and even more impossible to perform research on them. It wasn't as if Leyland could look for Gilbert and tell him that he wanted to do an experiment and ask him to be a specimen. It would be a wonder if Gilbert did not destroy Leyland in that instant. Perhaps the corpse of the Scorpion Man in Twilight Zone will be useful to me. Leyland touched his chin. The Scorpion Man was truly a Morning Star creature, and his corpse would definitely be useful as a reference for the AI chip simulations. Immediately after, Leyland overruled his own thoughts. There's not enough time. It isn't the volcano's dormant period. Furthermore, based on the predictions of the Coin of Destiny, Rank 3 Magi will meet with dangers that cannot be predicted in the icy cave. Only those with Morning Star strength can be safe. Leyland steeled his expression and let the AI chip continue research. Leyland was counting on the Lamia fingerbone and the bloodline ignition experiment, as well as the AI chip's analysis of the Morning Star realm to advance. As long as he did persevered in that regard, he would definitely be able to reach the threshold of Morning Star. If he was a regular giant Chemian serpent warlock, just obtaining one of those would be difficult. However, Leyland had everything, and even without assistance, all these would increase his chances of reaching Morning Star by a lot when compared to other Morning Star seedlings. Leyland had no doubt about this. Shah. The pendant at Leyland's waist suddenly emitted bright light. Leyland's brows furrowed, and he tapped on a secret imprint. Is this Marquis Leyland, Sir Enforcer? A low, hoarse voice was produced from the secret imprint. This was the communications officer that the Ouroboros clan had specifically allocated to him. He was in charge of contacting Leyland alone, and just by hearing his voice, Leyland could guess that something terrible had happened. I am Leyland. Is there anything wrong? His voice was calm and steady, even causing the voice from the other side to become gentler. Headquarters has received a denouncement. Marquis Miranda is accusing Marquis Robin of attempting to kill her. There is also a large amount of evidence. Based on the information, something has also seemingly happened within Robin's family. Get to the point. Leyland raised his eyebrows. The voice on the other end hesitated, but still presented the news. According to the order of the Elder Committee, Marquis Leyland is to head to Robin's family immediately and send Marquis Robin back to headquarters. They want me to capture Robin. Do you know that he's Mentor Gilbert's student and my senior? Leyland's expression became serious. I know. This is Duke Gilbert's order. The voice was silent for a while and then transmitted a black runic imprint. This was similar to a person's signature and could not be forged. This black rune was Gilbert's own symbol, and Leyland definitely would not misidentify it. I understand. Feeling jittery, Leyland ended communications and fell into silence. Mentor, what are you thinking? A long while later, a low voice was sounded in the tent. Tease Leyland didn't feel good the entire night due to the orders to capture Robin. Regardless of how things would unfold, it would still be disadvantageous to the Ouroboros clan. The disciple of a Morning Star Magus had shown signs of betrayal, which would be a fatal blow to the emotions of the warlocks that had just settled down. But since it was Gilbert's wish, Leyland could only carry it out. However, he somehow felt that things weren't so simple. Leyland, welcome. Robin hugged Leyland and laughed heartily. He was full of smiles and looked as though he wasn't affected by the news. Robin still had the appearance of a very young male, if one ignored the numerous runes imprinted on his face. Compared to the last time they met, the imprints on Robin's forehead were even more terrifying and practically occupied more than half of his face. It made Robin's original facial features seem immensely sinister and horrifying. Senior Robin, Leyland put on a stiff smile. After making brief bodily contact with him earlier on, a quiver had run through his entire being, and he'd felt every pore on his body contract. Such a feeling was an indication of what a ferocious beast Robin had become, automatically putting Leyland on guard. Leyland peered past Robin, and he scanned the members of his family behind him. The family that Robin belonged to was known as the Parble family. In the entire Ouroboros clan, their bloodline lineage was one of the purest, and they were a long-standing noble family that possessed great influence. On previous adventures, Robin could have dispatched 50 rank 3 warlocks as he wished, and he even brought along a pure-blooded nephew, which went to show how much of a standing their family had. But now, the teenagers that followed behind Robin had gloomy expressions. Or more accurately, they had an air of death around them. What made Leyland even more shocked was that behind Robin, there wasn't a single family elder to be seen, and there weren't many warlocks who were at rank 3 and above. Even Noah was nowhere to be found. Such a situation must definitely mean that something huge has happened. Leyland's hunch was getting clearer, but his facial expression only became more sincere, and he said slightly apologetically, "I'm sorry, Senior, according to Mentor's orders." "Oh. Rest assured it's a total misunderstanding. I'll go to headquarters with you tomorrow to explain." Robin seemed honest. He then enthusiastically invited Leyland. "You haven't been to my castle and laboratory before, right? Stay here for the night. Your vassals are also my guests. I have prepared a sumptuous banquet for them, and I believe you'll like it here." What else could Leyland say when Robin was being so cordial? He could only check into the vacant room that Robin had specially left for him, just as his vassals that had rushed here with him did into theirs. The oaken floor had an oily layer of gloss on it. The smell of incense filled the room, and the four walls were filled with portraits, armor, and swords. Although Parker had never specifically learned about assessments in this aspect, he also knew that this was surely one of the best rooms in the castle. "It's just that, my lord, you." Parker didn't have the slightest interest in examining the helmet that was said to have been adorned with the feathers of multicolored birds, but instead stood in front of Leyland with a worried look on his face. "I know. You mean to say that I had received orders to apprehend Robin, but yet I'm now associating with him, and this will inevitably make people suspicious and cause them to attack." Leyland lay on an armchair embedded with huge rubies and interrupted Parker with a wave of his hand, brushing him off. "But what else can we do? Robin is my senior after all, and before this matter has been fully investigated, we cannot make any rash conclusions. Anyway, he has already agreed to return with us tomorrow, so we don't have to demand anything else." Even upon hearing Leyland's words, Parker's smile remained bitter. This was, of course, the most normal scenario, but from his point of view, Robin seemed to be showing symptoms of insanity, and it was impossible to deduce his next course of action using logic. Furthermore, it was hard to guarantee that he didn't have plans to first numb them and then get rid of all his problems at once. Among all the bloodline nobility of the land, they were undoubtedly the best, and even orders from the headquarters would sometimes be boycotted by them, openly or secretly. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Parker was about to say something, a steady and rhythmic knocking sound came from the door. A tender voice sounded from behind the door. "Respected Marquis, the banquet has begun." "You may enter," Leyland nodded. The door was promptly opened, and a girl dressed as a servant, whose face still had baby fat, appeared in front of Leyland and Parker. The female servant's face flushed with nervousness as though it was her first time seeing such high-ranking guests. "How great it must be to be young." Leyland pinched her cheeks, hardly standing on courtesy. This made her blush all the way to her neck. He felt the aura of a pure chem-in bloodline from the girl. It seemed that she shared blood with Robin, and they probably weren't far removed. From the bloodline, it seemed that this girl had a bright future, and might even be in the direct line of descent in Robin's family. But in order to greet Leyland, she naturally had to change into the clothes of a servant. "What's your name?" Leyland asked, smiling. Parker stood aside, expressionless, as though he hadn't seen Leyland's gesture. As a high-ranking warlock who also once had authority over a warlock clan, he had become completely immune to such matters. Even if Leyland did anything in front of him, he would still be able to stand as straight as a pine tree. Etta, sir." The female servant's voice held a hint of a repressed sob, as though she was about to cry any moment. At her age, she obviously knew a lot. If this high-ranking bloodline nobleman wanted her, there wouldn't be any objections from anyone, regardless of if it was an elder or her parents. They might even send her over with great joy. Hence, although she was on the verge of tears, Etta held them back, trying to stay strong. Luckily for her, Leyland stopped teasing her. He gently asked Etta, whose face was turning fully red, "I also have another close friend in the Parble family by the name of Noah. Do you know him?" "Uncle Noah," the little girl cried out, yet shortly after she seemed to have remembered something and raised her guard against Leyland. It was all right, though. From her behavior earlier on, Leyland became aware of many things. "No need to be afraid. He and I are good friends. If anything has happened to him, I will definitely help." Leyland acutely discovered Etta's hidden hostility and plastered his kindest smile on his face. "Uncle Noah, he has been locked up," the little girl finally mumbled after a seemingly long struggle with herself, and her voice was practically so low that it couldn't be heard. "Got it, I will try rescuing him." Leyland caressed her head and guaranteed. "What do you think is the possibility of her telling the truth?" Leyland asked indifferently after sending the servant away. The possibility isn't high. After all, she was sent by them. Parker shook his head. I think so too, but it's also possible that it's information brought to us by the other powers in the Parble family. Leyland stroked his chin. He had a premonition that this trip to the Parble family was perhaps not as simple, and it was possible that more unexpected things were slated to happen. The atmosphere in the drawing room was tense, but a few seconds later, Leyland's light laugh broke the silence. Let's not think too much about this right now, and just enjoy the banquet. Yes, sir. Parker nodded and followed behind Leyland. He was decked in a black tailcoat and wore a beautiful tie around his collar, appearing as if he had made preparations long ago. While Leyland and company were enjoying the wine and delicacies made by the Parble family, and even the female warlocks that were brimming with enthusiasm, somewhere in the depths of the ancient castle, an invisible darkness spread endlessly. Divulging the information to him on purpose, your plan is really badly done. In a dim and narrow room, a blue secret imprint hovered in midair, and the voice of a middle-aged man faintly sounded. Rest assured. I know him very well. Once he knows about this, he definitely will give chase. A silhouette shrouded in black gas was conversing with the secret imprint. Numerous squirming veins emerged from the black gas from time to time, and were densely packed, making one's scalp go numb. I don't care about your plan, but Leyland has to be handed over to me. The blue secret imprint spoke with gritted teeth, apparently harboring an unforgettable hatred towards Leyland. We have been making deals and collaborating on many occasions, you don't have to worry. The figure shrouded in the black gas was silent for a while, then continued asking, Actually, these are all small matters. What I really wish to know is, when are you planning to take action? Very soon. The elders in the Ouroboros clan will soon become a thing of the past. Then our plan can truly be launched. After all, the counterattack of 3 Morning Star Warlocks would be hard to bear even for a radiant moon Magus. The glow of the blue imprint completely dimmed down with the last words of the middle-aged Magus. Very soon, the figure in the black gas muttered, and suddenly chanted a certain syllable. The gas dispersed, revealing a face all so familiar to Leyland. Leyland, who was still at the banquet, naturally knew nothing about all of this. Now he was like a huge butterfly, dancing gracefully among a cluster of flowers. The enthusiasm of the female warlocks of the Parble family practically melted the many warlocks, and those that Leyland had brought over were also immersed in delight. Feels like things won't be that simple. Parker leaned against a pillar with a glass of wine in his hand, watching Leyland's performance, yet a puzzled look flashed in his eyes.